This question is really funny to me because most people don't understand what consciousness is, right? In fact, no one actually properly knows what it is, why it evolved, whether it actually evolved, right? And what it's used for. In my own opinion, I believe that consciousness is akin to attention. It's adjacent to awareness, right? And so when you begin to frame it that way, it becomes a lot easier to understand. I genuinely do believe that attention and self-awareness are the primary functions of consciousness because it allows us to narrow in on certain things within our environment. And I, I believe if you want to take it from the stance that consciousness is an evolutionary byproduct, then that would make sense. We want to be able to zero in on things that we deem important in our environment, as opposed to if this wasn't a possibility, we would be subject to having to take in all this unfiltered information, all this unfiltered stimulation, right? And so, if you, like I said, if you want to take the evolutionary path, then that's that makes quite a lot of sense. So, if you want to go a little bit deeper, I think there's a model of consciousness that is a lot simpler, a lot easier to grasp, and sort of follows this idea that it's really is just a more fancy way to say attention, awareness. And I like those two words because they're very easy to understand. Consciousness is a word that's used as it's a buzzword. It's a mystical word. It's foreign. So in my own model, sensation and perception are two poles of the conscious process. Consciousness in this way is actually the imaginary distance between sensation and perception, right? It's the gap between these two things. It's both equally sensation and perception at the same time, and they serve both purposes. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, so what's the difference between sensation and perception, right? I sense something, I perceive something, what's the difference? And that is something that a lot of people get confused about, right? And this is just basic psychology. Sensation is external, right? Information receiving through sensory organs, whereas perception is more of an internal process where you can connect your thoughts, connect information within your own mind, right? So the information you receive from sensory organs, the information that you sense, then goes into the mind. The mind perceives said information and creates meaningful connections between these two, right? And then this way, we can then go back to the outside world to navigate, to help navigate the outside world, right? So they have that sort of symbiotic relationship where we take it in, we process, we spit it out, right? And it's that loop, it's that cyclical relationship. However, however, it is possible to sense things without perceiving things, and it's also possible to perceive things without sensing things, right? So a good example is change blindness. So change blindness is when you sense something, but you're unable to actually perceive it, right? So it doesn't actually register in your mind. You can't pinpoint what's different, right? You can't pinpoint and say, oh, I noticed this, right? I was aware of it. I attended to the difference. And so there's actually an exercise you can do, a change blindness exercise, where you flash two images uh, in quick succession, and one image has a slight visual difference. I might show an example on screen here, but one image will have a slight visual difference to the other, and you show them in quick succession, right? And what it's meant to exemplify is that you can actually sense changes in an image, right? Because your eyes are actually still looking at the image and noticing the changes, but you remain unaware of the changes. As you can see in this example, the light on the back windscreen of the car was present in one image and absent in the other. And so when you're looking at those two images side by side, or not side by side, one after the other, you're not actually noticing that change, right? But your eyes are still focused on the image. It's taking in everything. It's taking in all the color, all the lighting, all the objects. It's taking in the scene, but you can't actually notice a difference in between them until you put them side by side. And this one on screen is particularly hard. I chose it because I think I think it's pretty cool, right? I think it is pretty cool just to prove the point that I'm trying to say. So that's sensation without perception. But what about the other way around? Perception without sensation. Okay, well that's easy. Um, dreaming. Dreaming is a great example of being able to perceive something without any sort of sensation. You're asleep, but yet your mind is still there. You're still aware of a scene happening in your mind. And the mind actually the mind and actually in the case of dreaming, the mind is trying to replicate what it would regularly sense in the outside world. So again, they are very closely tied to each other, but they're not reliant, right? You can still perceive without senses. You can still sense without perception. Another example might be when you take psychedelic drugs. It's very, very obvious that, the hallucinations that occur whilst under the influence of those drugs aren't, you're not actually sensing the visual hallucinations. It's all just perception. So yeah, those are just two basic examples of that. So again, it does show the fact that these processes are not identical to each other. There is a big difference between them. Okay, so if we go back to consciousness, right, and consciousness being this gap between sensation and perception, how does one go about expanding it? If you look at it from the perspective of this model on screen, then the expansion is actually the narrowing of the gap between these two poles, right? It's when you bring sensation and perception closer to one another. So how do you achieve this, right? How do you unify these two polar processes, right? Without question, meditation is the best way to do this. Meditation is all about being in tune with your surroundings, being mindful, being insightful, taking in what is in front of you. It really is just training your attention, and it's just such a simple practice that I don't see occurring a lot these days. I know meditation can sometimes be seen as a self-help habit, right? All these people recommend, oh, meditate, 5 minutes a day, whatever. And that's good because it is giving meditation exposure, but it is so much more than just a self-help added to your morning routine habit. It's strengthening your mind. It's strengthening your consciousness. It's expanding. The narrowing of the gap between those two poles paradoxically leads to the expansion of consciousness. You're not you're not going to be stuck on one side. It's balance. That's what it's about. You're trying to balance sensation and perception, right? You don't want to be too involved in perceiving, right? You don't want to be lost in your own head without actually being in the moment, being aware of your surroundings. Likewise, you don't want to be completely overwhelmed by your surroundings, not being able to make any sense of the world, right? So what meditation does is it helps bring these poles closer together, right? It's pushing them closer together. The more you meditate, the clo the the closer these two poles become. And I genuinely do believe, although I haven't experienced this myself, I genuinely do believe that you can get to a point where the gap between these two things, between sensation and perception, is non-existent. You are so in the moment, so aware of everything, your own thoughts and your surroundings at the exact same time. A perfect coalescence between these two processes is, some would even argue that this is an example of enlightenment. I also believe that the more you're able to be aware of these two processes at the same time, the less you're going to be worried about things that don't matter. The less you're going to be concerned about the future, about the past even. Because again, it comes back to you being in the moment, being able to supervise your own thoughts, having that metacognition, being able to realize that, hey, my thinking right now isn't helpful. It isn't contributing anything meaningful to where I am, how I am right now. And so let's change that. Let's tip the scales back. Am I depressed because I'm in my own head? I'm spiraling down. That side of perception is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. I'm stuck in my head. Nothing is satisfying anymore. I can't have meaningful connections or conversations with people because it's all just assumptions and it's all just perceiving. It's all just, yeah, being stuck in your own head, really. And likewise, on the other side, if you're too heavily sided on the sensation, there's no meaning between anything. It's robotic. It's autonomous. So again, it's that balance and it's the narrowing of those two things. So meditation is obviously the number one method for expanding your consciousness. And that is just the most simple answer. Oftentimes, the most simple answer is the correct one. You don't need to make it complicated. There isn't a trick. There is no quick there is no quick method to expanding. There isn't to anything. It's a skill. It's a skill. People need to stop conceptualizing expansion as something that just happens when you wake up one day. It's like, oh, I've woken up and I'm able to see the world through a different lens. The colors are brighter. I feel happier. I feel more connected to people around me. You don't wake up feeling like that. No one wakes up feeling like that and is able to maintain it. You do hear regularly some people that wake up and they'll say, "Wow, that was a magnificent day. I was in the moment. I wasn't sad. I was experiencing bliss. Nothing mattered. I didn't. All the things that I thought mattered no longer did. I had no worries." But then they wake up the next day and it's completely back to normal. They're back to their regular pattern of thinking. They're back to being stuck in their own mind. Because the mind, it's capable. This is what it's capable for. This is what it's meant for. It's strengthening the mind. This is what meditation does. It's strengthening your attention. It's expanding your consciousness. These two things are the exact same thing. And the world that we live in today does not cater towards this skill. In fact, it takes away from it. This world is trying to eradicate this ability, this God-given ability that we have as human beings. And that's an idea for another video, but thank you for watching.